Hey everybody, it's Alana from Truly Great Life, and I just wanted to share a short message, um, sharing some thoughts that came to me just in the last 24 hours. Um, in my earlier or in my last post, I kind of shared some thoughts about how we make decisions that might impact our kids, for better or for worse, and risk and things like that. And so you know the phrase, about the hill you're going to die on. Like, is this the hill you want to die on? Or I'm not, this isn't the hill I want to die on, so you let something go, right? And and so I think we're living in times that are challenging us all in many different ways, both on the macro level, um, both in the big picture and on the micro level, like in our individual lives. I think many of us are being tested and questioned or asked or forced to question, what the heck do I stand for? What am I willing to risk? Um, and what am I willing to do about a problem I see or a situation I see that is asking me to stretch and grow beyond what is comfortable? And that's part, if you've seen any of my older videos, like that's part of what I address. But what I want to just share here, I'm going to try and keep it quick because I can ramble on, like the good song, is that one one thing I wanted to share is I had the privilege of meeting parents of an Israeli soldier last night who was unfortunately killed back in February in Gaza during his service there, and they came to speak about him and about who he was, and it was a very moving. It was a very moving event. It was very difficult uh, to obviously hear. Obviously, not difficult as difficult as it is for the family and the friends and everything. But it, you know, the mom made a point that has sat with me, which I want to share because maybe you already know it or maybe not. But I wanted to share it, which is that. And anyone who has a loved one in military service or in law enforcement or in anything like that is familiar with this idea of um, putting themselves at risk for while being tied to a higher purpose or being tied to a greater cause outside of themselves. And it's such a blatant example of potential risk and sacrifice for something greater than yourself when you're in law enforcement, when you're in military service. And so she was sharing how someone asked her at some point, because they're touring around and talking about him. So they're visiting different communities and sharing about him and his life and who he was. And someone apparently asked her, do you regret making Aliyah? Making Aliyah is when you move to Israel, and they moved there decades ago and you have raised a family there, and unfortunately lost this son. And so someone said, do you regret making Aliyah? And this is something that a lot of people who have made Aliyah, who live in Israel and whose children serve in the army, and unfortunately, if they fall during their service, or in, God forbid, terrorist attack. I mean, there's just a million and one ways that the world seems to be aware of the risks that can happen when you are in Israel. And as I mentioned in my last video, I do have a daughter there right now, and in addition to other friends and family. And her point was, anytime you have kids, all of us who have kids, no matter where we live, they are at risk. There's always a risk something can happen. It could be an illness, accidents happen, and they took some, I guess we can call it comfort, knowing that his leaving this world was happened in a way that saved lives, and that helped defend, his country. And it's something to think about, right? So those of us who maybe don't live in such a contested, difficult, complicated area of the world, who might be living in a quieter part of this globe, or not, what risks are our kids at? What risks are we? Oh, goodness gracious. What risks are we at in our day to day? Unfortunately, we all know people who have accidents, and we all know people who are victims of different things, or illnesses, and there's no free, there's no safe place that is void of all these things, right? And so the question becomes, what hill are you willing to die on, right? Is it living in a place where there is that level of meaning and connection on such a high level when you're serving, right? And taking comfort in that. Eventually, I assume that your child was doing what they felt called to do on some level. So it's just something to think about. So we're going through our lives, and a lot of us at times are on automatic pilot, right? It's hard to be like mindful and conscious all the time, but we don't want to be zombies. We don't want to be just blindly following. We don't want to be just going with the flow in an unconscious way, right? On repeat. So I wanted to just share that, looking at your own life, what hill are you willing to die on? God forbid, no one should have to be injured or die, but like what are you feeling called to? And this is that M in meaning. If you go back to the videos I've made on perma, what is it you're being called to be part of that is greater than you, that is larger than you, that if it entails a risk, if it entails a risk, that you're still willing to do it because that greater purpose or calling is worth the risk, right? The risk reward. So just think about that in your own life, both in your individual unit, in your family unit, in your social unit, in your work unit, in your community. What is it that you're willing to do and not do? And what is it that you're feeling uncomfortable with that may be a sign that there's something to explore there, to stretch and get involved in, or to stretch and be open to? There's so much going on in this world right now that I think is calling on us to stretch and to get clear on what things are, what things aren't, and what is it that we're willing to get involved in, to dedicate our lives to, or part of our lives to. And so what is that for you? And is it something that you're just inheriting? Is it something that you're just absorbing because people around you are doing it? Or is it something that really resonates with who you are and what you value and what's important to you? And so it just came to me that, you can change this phrase from like, what hill are you willing to die on, to what hill are you willing to live on? I'm guilty of this, like playing it safe or being in that like nuance balance. And there is nuance and there is balance, and it's not like one or the other, but what hill, which stands out from the plain, right? From the flat plain there, the hill. What hill are you willing to stand on? What hill are you willing to live on? And sometimes it's easier to look at like the negative or what the not is. Like, what I'm not going to, I'm not willing to die on that. I am willing to die, for that cause, or get involved or take risks for that cause, right? Like it can be helpful when you say, I'm not willing to die on that hill, then like something's going to cross the line for you. But if we flip it to, what hill are you willing to live on? What hill are you willing to stand on? So what is it that's calling to you today, now, to stand up and be counted, right? To stand up and say something. What is that for you right now that can contribute to your own good, the good in your life, the good in your family's life, the good in your community's life and existence? Like, what are you being called to? And if you choose not to, answer that call, are you willing to explore why that is? Are you willing to be open to maybe changing, why that is or what that is? So anyways, just some food for thought, and thank you so much. Talk to you later.